Now, over in Somalia, one general and 6 of his bodyguards have become victims of a suicide car bombing. The attacker reportedly rammed his car carrying explosives into the general's convoy, who was later identified as General Mohammed Jamal Gubali near the Defense Ministry headquarters in the capital, Mogadishu.
A Somali general and at least 7 of his bodyguards were killed when the vehicles ran into a car bomb driven by an Al-Shabaab suicide attacker in the capital. Al-Shabaab, which frequently launches attacks on officials in Mogadishu, staged this attack in the build-up to a vote for a new parliament and president, part of efforts to rebuild a nation that has been shattered by 2 decades of war and chaos. Al-Shabaab, which once ruled much of Somalia, wants to topple the Western-backed government of President Hassan Sheikh Mohamud, who is seeking re-election in the upcoming vote. Voting for the 275-seat parliament is scheduled to start on September 25th and end on October the 10th, with new lawmakers sworn in on October the 30th. Those lawmakers will in turn pick a president on October the 30th. Due to security concerns, including the continuing Al-Shabaab insurgency, voting will not be based on one person, one vote, but instead about 14,000 people representing federal states across the nation will choose members of the Legislative Assembly. That is a fraction of Somalia's 11 million people, but it's much more than the 135 elders who picked the outgoing parliament in 2012.
The president has attended the opening of high-level plenary on addressing movements of refugees and migrants at the 71st session of the United Nations headquarters in New York. President Muhammadu Buhari was accompanied to the session by the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Mr. Geoffrey Onyema, Governor of Zamfara State, Abubakar Yari, and Minister of Interior, Abdurrahman Dambazau. In his presentation at the UN General Assembly, President Buhari is expected to address, among other issues, the plight of the over 9 million people in the Lake Chad Basin. President Buhari is one of the 5 speakers scheduled to address the plenary session. Also today, the president will be attending the AU Peace and Security Council meeting at the AU Observer Mission Office before meeting with the British Permanent Representative to the United Nations, Mr. Matthew Rycroft. Well, State House correspondent Chukwuma Onwekusi files in this report.
I would have told you that New York City will be agog with activities as world leaders converge on it for the 71st session of the United Nations General Assembly. But instead, what we are going to have is a complete lockdown of the entire city following the explosion that rocked Manhattan last night. That explosion occurred on West 23rd Street, some kilometers away from the Nigerian building, which is on West 44th Street, and of course away from the United Nations General Assembly building. The authorities say investigations are continuing to unravel the cause of that explosion that got over 29 people injured. Now the whole city is on high alert as there is going to be a lot of caution and precautionary measures as world leaders converge. President Muhammadu Buhari, who has already settled in, will be among the over 190 world leaders that will be brainstorming here on Monday.
There are many issues and topics to treat, and most of them are of relevance to Africa and to Nigeria specifically. Issues of migration will be tackled, issues of internally displaced people, issues of security. Nigeria is also going to bring up the issue of the Lake Chad and many other diverse issues, all with significance for Africa and for Nigeria. Here, our president is going to meet with the Prime Minister of Israel, is going to meet with that of Great Britain, is going to meet with the American president, is going to meet with that of France, and so many others. How better can we have it as Nigerian Nigerians?
Nigeria will benefit from all the meetings?
You can be sure. You know, there are 3 special thematic areas for our president: economy, security, anti-corruption. In most of his outings, he had been dwelling so much on security, and we see the result of that already in the country.
Still on Monday, the president will attend the meeting on modern slavery, people trafficking, to be chaired by the Prime Minister of Britain, Mrs. Theresa May. That's the situation for now. From the United Nations building in New York City, Chukwuma Onwepusi, Channels Television News.
The executive director of the West African Network for Peace Building, Mr. Chukwuemeka Eze, who incidentally bears the same name with our first guest, joins me now from Accra. Mr. Eze, I'm glad you could join us.
Thank you so much.
President Muhammadu Buhari is at the UN General Assembly, whereby tomorrow he addresses plenary. He'll be raising issues surrounding the Lake Chad Basin. What is it about this region that makes it so delicate yet volatile?
Yes, I think for the first time since we started lamenting on the relationship between climate change and conflict, we are seeing it firsthand. If you look at what is happening in the Lake Chad Basin, you notice that the Lake Chad have dried up by over 90%. And this is a region that produces food. So what that is pushing us to is food insecurity. And that in itself will translate to the multiplicity of the conflicts we are going to have again in that region. Do not forget that it's not just about the climate change. It is also about the fact that within that climate change is also the conflict that exists in those areas that does not even allow people to again go to the farm. So it is going to have a multiplier effect on the already sorry state of that region. And this includes part of Niger, part of Chad, part of Cameroon, and part of northern Nigeria. So we have crisis in our hand. And yet the international community is unable to vote money into that situation because they are spending more money trying to deal with the issue in Syria and also trying to counter violent extremism going out around the globe.
You just mentioned food shortage as part of the challenges facing that region. What could the UN possibly do?
Well, I think the most important thing is for them to understand that it is not enough for us to continue to focus our attention on ongoing conflict in Syria and to begin to talk about how to counter violent extremism. I think it's also important that the future of the Lake Chad Basin is considered as a future priority. Otherwise, the multiplier effect will affect this region greatly.
Mr. Eze, would you pass off responsibility for what's happened here on leaders of countries within the region?
Sorry, could you take that again?
So would you pass off responsibility for what has happened here on leaders of the countries in this region?
Well, I think to the extent that Nigeria is one of the hegemony, it is important that we provide leadership at this level. Unfortunately, all the countries are not within the ECOWAS region. So we need to have some kind of discussion that will now mandate the presidents and the leaders in this country to begin to focus more attention on how they deal with the issue. Not just on this short term, but to begin to develop a long-term strategy, which includes how to respond to the dryness of the Lake Chad Basin. We are going to have more of conflict induced by climate change. Look at what is happening with the headers conflict. It is all because there is climate change, pastures are becoming dry, so they are moving to the south, where they will get more pasture. So I think we need to focus attention on the relationship between climate change and
Thanks again. Thank you so much, Mr. Eze, for joining us on Network Africa.